Praise the Lord, everybody, and welcome to Why We Hate Church Folk. Why We Hate Church Folk is a platform that asks the questions without any of the judgment.
I am your church administrator, Wood, aka Wood L. Jenkins if you're hood, and Graham Wellington III if you're corporate.
All right. So, Darrick, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your show, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty here.
Yeah. First of all, thank you both so much for inviting me on. I'm really excited. This is like the first time I've been invited on to somebody else's podcast
Awesome.
as a guest. So I'm
Awesome.
very excited about that. But yeah, so a little bit about me. Name's Darrick. I grew up in a very small town in the South.
Okay.
And then I eventually moved away from home to go to college. And while I was in college, I played football and studied religion and culture with an emphasis in Christian ministry.
Okay.
And so that's what I got my degree in. And since then, I worked as a youth pastor for about 2 years at a church that was local to my area. And since left that church, but I'm now serving as a high school coordinator at my current church, where I lead high school small groups, work with high school kids every week, usually on Mondays. But that's what I do, kind of when I'm not running my Instagram and podcast, and you both know how much work that takes. Really putting in the efforts there. You guys even have more platforms than I'm on, so it's like extra work.
Yeah.
So props to y'all for that.
Shout out to church administrator.
Getting the work done.
Yeah.
But yeah, so with my podcast and with my Instagram and really Twitter, it started out as a Twitter.
Okay.
And I started it as a Twitter last summer, leading up to the election, the 2020 election. Because as everybody knows, the most infamous man on the planet was the president the last 4 years, and treated like Voldemort. He who shall not be named. But
right.
really, I just created the account to be able to rage tweet from kind of a Christian perspective about how policies that I believe in and politicians that I support and politicians that I'm opposed to. And then it eventually turned into an Instagram account. And then that's when I started the podcast. And so that's kind of brought us to where we are today. And I'm really, really loving it, being able to have conversations with people, working and getting some ideas out there. I really did it because I was looking for a progressive Christian platform to follow or to listen to as a podcast, because I love listening to podcasts, but couldn't find one. So I thought, what the hell, might as well make my own. And so I went ahead and did it. And apparently other people are also looking for the same thing, which is, why I'm able to be on here with you and post every day or so on the Instagram and stuff. So
yeah. So one question: are you still in ministry? Did you say you?
Yeah. So I volunteer at my church as a high school ministry coordinator.
Okay. And so, in what town did you grow up in?
I grew up in it's a small town in Northwest Arkansas.
Okay.
So yeah, it's pretty close to Bentonville, where Walmart was founded.
We know.
Because we're both in Arkansas. So
we're absolutely native Arkansans.
Okay, so Northwest Arkansas, Gravette, Arkansas.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you're in Conway, and I'm in.
I'm in Conway, and I went to Fayetteville.
So.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. So you guys are super familiar with.
Yeah. We know your life.
Yeah. It's as bad as it sounds. But I still I like to go home on the holidays, but I try to keep my eyes front and centered because of the different types of flags that I usually drive past when I'm driving home for Thanksgiving.
Same.
Yeah. Gotcha.
Yep.
Gotcha. So you say you're in the Midwest now?
Yeah. I moved up to Kansas City in 2012 to go to college, and then once I graduated in 2016, I just kind of stayed here because I kind of fell in love with it. It's a diamond in the rough. Never been to Kansas City. You should. We have the best barbecue in the world. So,
well, which side though? There's a Missouri and a Kansas City. So I mean,
Kansas, the Missouri.
A lot different. Okay.
Yeah,
there's a difference.
There is a big difference.
Well, cool. So you grew up in Northwest Arkansas, which is, like you said, we have some experience with Arkansas growing up. So can you tell us a little bit about your background, like what kind of church you grew up in? Was it like Baptist, Methodist? What did you grow up in?
Yeah. I ran the gauntlet really as I
Okay.
was growing up. So my family's not religious. I kind of
Hmm.
made the decision myself.
Okay.
But when I was in sixth grade, I started, being in Arkansas, being in the Bible Belt, you just kind of go to VBS here, and another
Hmm.
friend invites you to another VBS. You might go to church on Christmas and Easter. It's just
Hmm.
kind of what you do in the South.
Mhm.
Right.
And then when I was in sixth grade, my dad was deployed to go overseas
Hmm.
and started going to a Southern Baptist church, and that's where I was actually baptized. And I did all the right things. I prayed the sinner's prayer. Said the
Hmm.
ABCs and all that
Hmm.
kind of stuff. And then eventually stopped going to church there, and then went to and from with another friend of mine to a Pentecostal church
Hmm.
in Springdale
Hmm.
for off and on for about a year or so. But it wasn't really. I wasn't like a church kid at that point. I was just kind of going because I liked hanging out with my buddy, and his cousin was really fun.
Hmm.
Um, and then I eventually lost a really close friend of mine in high school. He passed away. I was a sophomore. He was a junior, and he
Okay.
died of staph infection. And when that happened, I got really angry and
Hmm.
was like, I don't know how a loving God could exist if he let a 16-year-old kid die from something so strange like staph
Yeah.
infection.
Yeah.
So essentially renounced my faith. And
Hmm.
then when I was a junior in high school, I was eventually invited by some friends of mine. They were on the football team, and they invited me to go to church with them, and ended up being really involved with this church.
Hmm.
And really, really, my exit from this church was what kind of started my deconstruction journey.
Hmm.
But it was a charismatic evangelical church. They do the really good music, really good stage lighting,
Hmm.
the tongues, the shaking, all of that.
Hmm.
And that's where I experienced a lot of. I learned a lot while I was at that church.
Hmm.
That's where I, really taught myself how to read the Bible, how to have time alone to meditate, to pray, to do all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
And eventually, once I left that church, I had a pretty rough break
Hmm.
from that church, so
Hmm.
much that they've blocked me on social media.
Oh wow.
And once I moved away from a small podunk town in Northwest Arkansas, I moved to a big city
Hmm.
where I was around people who didn't necessarily look like me and didn't necessarily think like me.
Hmm.
I had a lot of changes that needed to be made, and a lot of learning that needed to be done. And so, yeah, it was quite the journey. So yeah, I ran the gauntlet, from Southern Baptist Church to Pentecostal to charismatic evangelical. So
Gotcha. And so you come to Kansas City, you go to school, you study ministry, you become a minister. And so what got you to the point where, because what it sounds like to me, maybe you didn't have the, let me not belittle your trauma, because everybody's trauma is their trauma. Do you feel like that situation made you not want to lean into God, or did it make you lean into your faith even more?
yeah, that's a great question. I
Mhm.
think really what it was one of those instances where I gave up on the church, but I didn't give up on Jesus.
Mhm.
And that's always stuck with me because it's church hurt happens literally at every church you go to.
Right.
um but for me, just always having that faith in Jesus, who we believe in, and follow, and literally is the cornerstone for the entire religion that I proclaim and profess.
Hmm.
Being able to lean into that was really what was allowed me to kind of continue on, through, leaving the church, having been hurt by the church, continuing to study ministry, and then eventually leave college and go be a youth pastor somewhere. So,
Gotcha. Gotcha. Now, what once you got out of school and you became a youth pastor and everything, did you find it hard to stay in ministry because of church hurt or anything, or was it like riding a bicycle? You got back in and you just loved it from day one, and everything went hunky
yeah,
dory.
yeah, that's a really good question.
Mhm.
So while I was in college, as when I moved away, I didn't have my church anymore. So I
Mhm.
started doing the famous college kid thing where they church hop.
Yeah.
And so I went to several churches in the area, and eventually went to this one for like a Thanksgiving feast, and we had like spaghetti and some enchiladas. Like, it was not a traditional Thanksgiving dinner, but it was, I was at a table with other people, which that's what Thanksgiving is.
Right.
And I met he was the youth pastor at the time and was also leading the college ministry. His name is Elliot, and he's somebody that I still have conversations with to this day. Like, he's someone who I consider a mentor, a very close friend. And he invited me to come to their youth ministry and be like a volunteer leader for their high school ministry there. And so I did that while I was in college. And then as soon as I graduated, I started working. It was a Methodist church that I was volunteering at. And then was eventually able to get into the Methodist church as a youth pastor after graduation.
Okay, cool. So now what made you said you weren't finding what you needed. What exactly were you looking for when you decided to start your podcast? Like, I know you kind of touched on it earlier, but what exactly were you looking for in a podcast that melded progressive and Christian? Well, I guess it's almost the same thing for you. So what made you decide that that's what you needed, and what were you looking for that made you decide to start this?
Yeah. So as, going through my college career, learning a lot of new things and new secrets, and not secrets, I guess, mysteries of the Bible and of the Christian faith. They weren't lining up with the politics that I had as I was a kid. Like I said, coming from a small town in Arkansas, there's a certain political, socio-political, belief and ideal that you subscribe to. And that wasn't who I was anymore. And so I eventually, I call myself a progressive, politically and theologically. So when it comes to, politics, people on the left side of the aisle: Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Elon Omar, Cory Bush, just really great politicians that, are considered to be a part of the progressive caucus in the United States government. That's kind of where I align politically. And then also just theologically, there are some things where, a lot of the religious identity that I held close to me wasn't the same anymore as I, entered my early 20s, mid 20s. And so I was looking for a podcast or a community that coupled those two things together, where somebody who literally could just look at me in the face and say, "Hey, it's okay that you believe in Jesus and you also believe that healthcare is a human right." And I couldn't find a podcast. I couldn't find an Instagram. I couldn't find anything that was doing that. And so I was like, well, what if I tried to be that person? What if I tried to be that voice? What if I tried to create that community? And so that's really what it came down to, was just being able to create a community around progressive politics and progressive theology.
So,
Please go ahead.
Excuse me, man of God. As somebody who, maybe would have identified in the past as conservative, and who has, lived life and walked through things and become this self-proclaimed progressive, it seems like when you come out of something, even though other people haven't been delivered or come out of it like you have, you can see why they stay the places they stay. What is it about progressive, just thinking in general, that doesn't click? Because I feel like the Jesus, not the Bible, but Jesus seemed to be very much a renegade, very much on another level, like not talking about what other people are talking about, not doing the things that other people are doing, not valuing what other people value. And I feel like once you come across something radical, I often ask myself, like, what's not clicking? If you had to answer, not that you speak for all conservatives or former conservatives, but what's not clicking? Why is it so easy to hold on to?
I think a lot of it has to do with power and privilege. For the most, and I think, the right likes to talk about, identity politics and how the left is the biggest, user of identity politics and things like that. But in reality, when we look at it, we just had last night, there was 2 gubernatorial races in New Jersey and Virginia. And when we look at the Virginia race, we see an overwhelming majority of white folks voting for the conservative candidate, whereas, the Democratic candidate is supported by Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. And so I think that that's a huge proponent of it. And I also think when it comes to coupling your faith with your politics. I like to say I thought of this maybe a year or two ago, and it's something that I actually like try to abide by every day. And I'm a progressive because of my faith in Jesus, whereas I feel like sometimes, not all the time, but I would say much of the time, conservative Christians
Mhm.
are conservatives in spite of their faith in Jesus, because
Mm.
the Jesus that I believe in was a political rebel, like you
Mhm.
said, Bijou. It was just he was murdered by the state.
Mhm.
He spoke out against. He was anti-empire.
Mhm.
Um, I don't want to say he was anti-rich, but the scripture where Jesus is saying it's harder for a rich man to enter into the kingdom of heaven than it is for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. I think that speaks for itself. You know.
Mhm.
And so when I tried to couple those things with conservative principles and with conservative values and policies, it didn't line up. It just
Mhm.
doesn't line up.
Mhm.
Hard agree. While we're while we're I mean, I just, I scroll through the IG feed. It's nothing but bops. And
Mhm.
it made me wonder, when Jared and I first talked about this show,
Mhm.
I low-key manifested this show. I got up one morning and said, you know what, I want to co-host a podcast. And I
Yeah.
put a post up on Facebook, and people were like, oh, I have a show, I have a show. And then Jared hit me up and said, I have this idea of a show called Why We Hate Church Folk. And I was like, oh no, this is the one. This
Mhm.
is the one. And so I think we've spent the last, 2 years, 2.5 years,
Mhm.
deconstructing our faith
Yeah.
live. And we've had, a few conversations on the side, but really just like in real time, deconstructing our faith. I guess my question is, how long have you been shouting into the void?
Yeah. I think I've been doing it myself since probably 2014.
Okay.
But I've been vocal about these things for probably, I mean, really since the 2016 election.
Mhm.
When those exit polls came back and we saw, it was, what was it, 81% of white evangelicals were in support of Donald Trump. And I'm just like, what?
Yep.
How?
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 Mhm.
And so I just had a lot of questions. And really for 4 years is when I've kind of been, shouting into the void. But really the last, I don't know, year and some change, I've been doing it and recording it basically
Yeah.
Yeah.
and putting it on Instagram and Twitter. So
I really appreciate Jared for like drawing me into this world of other people deconstructing, because initially I felt alone, like I was
yes.
taking this rebellious walk all by myself, questioning all by myself. And we're in, these um, charismatic evangelical churches as well. And so it's
Yeah.
nonstop, you know, be quiet, listen to the spirit, whoop de whoop. And so I'm glad for these opportunities to have something that we can join together around. And I think that is about valuing people the
Mhm.
same way that Christ did. And I
Absolutely.
just don't see how that gets so lost.
I couldn't agree more,
Do you?
honestly.
So I had a question in regards to what you were saying earlier. People being um, Republican or conservative in spite of their faith. I wonder sometimes though, and I would have to say maybe I disagree with you, and this is what I mean. So we've talked about this before, Bijou and I, earlier in the show. Sometimes I feel like they're not, and I'm not gonna say if someone's Christian or not per se, but I feel like sometimes they're Christian in name only. Like
Mm,
it's the cultural thing to do, right? Like I remember, I think a guy Richard Spencer, that crazy neo-Nazi guy,
yeah.
he's like I'm culturally Christian, because
Yeah. What does that
because it's
mean?
been yeah because it's been co-opted over the years. When
Yeah.
you look back to like Billy Graham and they started co-opting Christianity to promote
The moral
capitalism.
majority and
Yeah,
yeah.
and over the years, you find that. So, my question to you is: do you really think that these people are Christian that are, and are conservative despite their Christianity, or do you think that they're more just? It just sounds good to say that I'm Christian. I don't really actually believe this stuff. I just,
Yeah.
this is just a part of everyday life in America now.
Yeah.
We don't actually believe it, but it's here. We do it.
Yeah.
It's socially. It's something social to do on Sundays.
Yeah. That's a
Um,
That's a really good question. I think, I've spent so many years now being told that I'm not a real Christian that I usually avoid telling other people that they're not real Christians.
Smart.
Right.
And
Smart.
like I think back to the words of Jesus when he says, "You'll know them by their fruits." And I'm
Mm,
consistently not seeing fruits being produced from the other side of the aisle, so to speak.
yeah.
And it's I think there is something to it, and
Mhm,
which is really interesting to me
mhm,
because cultural Christianity is an ancient Eastern religion
mhm.
um, that was founded by someone who isn't a white person, and it was. I think what you're saying, is basically they're just subscribing to this colonized way of being a Christian, right?
Yeah.
This white American, the straight white American Christian,
Mhm,
and you go to church on Sundays. You don't question your faith. You
mhm,
believe the Bible is the inerrant,
mhm.
perfect, inspired, actual Word of God, and
But you
and
also don't read the whole thing.
yeah. Or if you do
Well,
read it, you're not getting it. The
mhm.
point.
You're not even trying.
Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of times when I think about it, because the right cause, doesn't really have policy, right? So
Yeah.
we have to get you on emotional ties. So what better way to do it than through religion? You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
can, and then the great thing and the bad thing about Christianity, it doesn't take much effort to just say I'm Christian, right? Like when you think about Islam, like praying 5 times a day and not eating pork and not drinking. Whereas with the Christians, we like, I do what I want, and then I just go pray and ask for forgiveness, and then I'm squared
Yeah.
up again the next day. So I just feel like it's an easy way to keep an emotional, keep you tied emotionally to conservative politics without ever actually having to give you any substantive policy. I can just say, well, we're all
Yeah.
Christians, so we all go to church on Sunday, we all praise, we all
We
do
all
this,
go to church. I hate that one. I
and
hate that one.
but I don't. And you're like, but I need health care. Pull
Yeah.
yourself
Sorry
up
about
by your
that.
Mm,
bootstraps. Yeah, like,
That'll
well,
be $70 a
actually,
month.
right, or actually, you could just pray. That's your healing.
Also, yes.
That's your
Yeah.
healing, and then give unto God. That's how you get. We don't actually have any policy for you. We don't have any welfare. We don't have anything for you. You just pray and then give, and somehow money will magically appear in your pocket. Now, don't get me wrong. I do believe in seed and harvest, but
Right.
but I'm also like, yeah, you could also just give some people some money too. Like that's also an option. So
Honestly, I mean that's how the first century church functioned.
yeah,
No one lived with want. They
yeah,
divided everything. Like the story of the couple that didn't actually give their portion, where they
hmm
dropped dead.
hmm
Like that should tell us everything that we need to know right there.
What a
Like,
forgiving God. I'm glad I don't, because there've been some
It's
times where I had an opportunity to give and I did not. So
it's in the
right.
same Bible. So here's my
thank
question. I
God.
heard you make a comment about an American straight white church, which the spirit of it said something to me. Just follow me for a second. So once again, you do not speak on behalf of all of anybody.
Right.
You're just you. In your humble opinion, how hard is it to be gay affirming, trans affirming, person of color affirming as a Christian? Like, how hard is it?
Yeah. Um I for me, it took me years. Um I mean, when I said that I moved away and went to college, I was on a college football team. There's 100 dudes on that team, and the majority of them didn't look like me. So I had
Mhm,
never interacted with that many black football players in my entire life, unless I was
mhm,
playing against them in the state
Right.
playoffs. When we played against teams like Nashville and Lone Oak, some of the South Arkansas
mhm,
areas,
mhm,
and it took me a while, and I said a lot of the wrong things
mhm,
without knowing it.
mhm,
The microaggressions were real. Um, and then it took me joining a fraternity that was the fraternity on campus that welcomed the majority of gay men on campus into the fraternity to actually
mhm,
sit down and have conversations with those
Mhm.
guys. And so I started to unpack all these beliefs that I had held sincere, and I'm like, wait a second, I was racist. I'd still have racist tendencies that I'm constantly, speaking out against and working to overcome. I
Mhm,
was homophobic. I was
mhm,
Islamophobic. Like every type of phobic that comes
mhm,
with being, a white kid from a small town in the South. Like everything that you can think of was something that
mhm,
I had to unlearn. So it took a lot of work for me. But when you really break it down and get to the meat of it, that's literally all Christianity is loving those folks, affirming them, affirming their existence,
mhm,
and letting them know, hey, you're made in the image of God, just like me, and that's it. There's nothing
mhm,
to be said after that comma in that sentence. It's a period. It should end with a period.
mm,
I'm getting tearful because the most poignant part of that narrative for me was that this is the work of Christianity. For whatever you're not, you probably were born phobic because America can be a terrible place for rhetoric that affirms
Yeah.
other people. I mean, just like whatever you're not, you can definitely comfortably be against. Shout out to Conundrum Owens and that other lady with the complicated name, and their cohorts and all of that, right? Like there's always room.
mhm,
But it's so important to me. I wasn't perfect. I never was, and I know that I've got a lot of minority boxes I can check, and there's some boxes that I haven't that I don't check, and for those I had to work myself out of uh, saying transphobic slurs because I
Yeah.
heard other people say them and I didn't know, you know, homophobic slurs. Back in the day, we used to call everything gay. Like
Yep.
we never took a thought,
mhm,
and it's funny because it's always been people. And when I think about Jesus, I think about all these one-to-one recruiting the disciples personally by hand,
Yep.
the
mhm,
woman at the well, even the Canaanite, which Jesus, you owe us an apology. That was rude. And I'm pretty sure you were being xenophobic.
mhm,
Yep.
Okay. Because how did you know she was Canaanite? She must have had a look.
mhm,
But anyway, um, that is the work of Christianity. It's one thing to say, I believe, Jesus is my Lord and Savior, died on the cross, all that stuff. Great. But do you think like Jesus? Do
Right.
you talk like Jesus? And I want to move to change the name of it to Pauline because y'all hate what's in the red, but whatever Paul said, y'all like, oh no, let's do that. And I
Pauline.
don't like
Facts.
that.
Yes, that is the absolute facts. That is so. I
I'm
mean, I
tired of
feel
it.
I don't know how many times I've sat during a sermon and I've heard the preacher say, "The Apostle Paul said," "The Apostle Paul said," "The Apostle Paul said." I'm like, okay, but what did Jesus say?
What did Jesus say?
Like,
Me.
are we going
Right.
to talk about that?
We're
Right.
not.
Right.
Exactly,
But it's
exactly.
hard to preach Jesus
Yeah.
because if you start preaching Jesus, all of a sudden the four walls aren't as relevant. How many
Yep.
times did Jesus preach about giving or about building funds or about buildings that weren't getting torn down? It's hard.
Yep.
Well,
I
also,
do it.
what y'all said, something y'all said earlier about one of the things about Christianity, the main focus is love, right? And love is
Mhm.
not a feeling; it's an action. And if
Absolutely.
and if somebody if you really want to practice Christianity, it's through action. It's not
Hmm.
through just feels. So if you in
Yeah.
there preaching about action, people are like, wait a minute now, I got to do stuff
I have
Monday
to
through
go.
Friday.
I have to
Yeah,
go yell at the 17-year-old waitress in an
right,
hour about what
right,
she forgot my ranch.
right,
Those
right.
types of things. Yeah, and I
Exactly.
always every time somebody says that it's right belief as opposed to right action, I'm like, okay,
Mm.
Jesus's brother literally said that without works your faith is dead, and I will take the word of Jesus's brother over literally
I mean,
most
because he was
everybody else
right
on the
there.
planet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, he's
he
his
grew up
brother.
with the kid.
Right. He's
Yeah.
right. He's right there with him.
Exactly. So it's just, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Love is an action,
yeah.
100%.
I
And
want to
it's an
go back
action
for.
that challenges you. That's my last one. I'm
Oh, you
getting fired
fine.
Yes.
up.
Oh,
Good
you
teacher make
fine.
you want to teach.
I wanted to ask you, going back, you said that you had to unlearn a lot of things, right? And
Mhm.
you spend a lot of time with people of different backgrounds. And so one of the things I want to ask you, for anybody that may be listening that looks like you, that wants to deconstruct, did you find it how did you find people being did you find that those people were welcoming to you as far as learning to be better? Like, did you find, like, if you said something a little off, that it didn't did it come off as did it come off as angry, or did it come off as, oh, I get it, you don't understand, and let me explain to you why that's wrong?
Yeah.
Okay.
I I always think back to my first instance
Mhm.
of really running into saying the exact wrong thing, and
Mhm.
it turning into a really big learning process for me.
Mhm.
And it was one of my teammates walked
Mhm.
past me and slapped me on the back of the leg
Mhm.
with his lanyard that he had his keys on.
Mhm.
And I was 18. I had just moved from our. This was during camp, like August. The season hadn't even started. It was just
Mhm.
the football team and the volleyball team on campus.
Mhm.
And he ran past me because we were going to meetings. And his name was Quinlan. He was one of my black teammates. And I said, "Boy, I'm gonna whip you."
Oh.
And that was not. I didn't know at that
Yep.
point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he turned around and he came up to me and he like if a cartoon, if you could actually have steam coming out of a person's ears and their nose, like
Yeah.
this is what would have been happening.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Whoa, hey, what? Why are you so upset?" And he like balled his fist up and then just turned around and walked away. And then
Yeah.
I approached him after our team meeting that day. I said, "Hey, Q, what did I say?
Yeah.
What did I do?" And he's like, "I'm sorry that I blew up on you like that. This is what you said, and this is why that hurt." And I was like, "Oh my God,
Mm.
this is something that I've grown up saying
Mhm.
to anybody."
Yeah.
But it has a certain connotation when you're saying it to a black person, right?
Right.
And
Right.
and and I just that was the moment that sticks with me the most when
Mm.
that's what started me down the path of, oh, I have a lot of things to unlearn. And so to answer your question, that first instance was
Mhm.
anger, and then, oh, I understand.
Mhm.
But after that, I did some quiet listening.
Mhm.
I didn't actually like walk up to people and ask them questions.
Mhm.
I did quiet listening, and ask for clarification on
Mhm.
different things. And um, it was just a long process of
Mhm.
taking the back seat
Mhm.
when being a white guy. I was
Mhm.
always in the front seat
Mhm.
or the driver's seat, right?
Gotcha.
And so it was a long process, and like I'm still to this day I'm working on it.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you found someone that didn't take your
It almost
indiscretion and
happened.
immediately, yeah, and then he didn't go for it because I'm
Yeah.
like, oh wow, you said what? And then I'm like,
Yeah,
okay,
your
yeah,
reaction was like the exact like
yeah,
now
yeah,
27-year-old Derek, when I hear that now, I'm like, "Oh my god.
yeah,
I cannot believe that I actually let those words come out of my mouth."
yeah, yeah,
But I like I said, that was a decade ago. 18
yeah,
year old Derek, fresh out of Arkansas,
yeah,
he had no
yeah.
idea.
Yeah, no, and I understand that. And that's, I'd find, I don't give excuses to racists, but I do say that sometimes we just don't know what we don't know. And it takes, if somebody's willing to learn, then I think it's worth giving them the benefit of the doubt to say, hey,
Yeah.
this is why that's wrong. And I'm glad you guys were able to find common ground and talk
Yeah.
through it without violence. Because I feel
Yeah.
like I feel like it could have went the other way very quickly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And he would
so
have just wrecked me if we
yeah.
started throwing nucks, like it would have wrecked me easily.
Um, so Derek, I'd love to keep talking to you, but I want to get into this fire round. So are you ready for
Yeah,
that? Okay.
absolutely.
So we got 5 question fire round. First question is, what is your favorite thing about church?
Oh, the free coffee. That's always my go-to. I've mastered the shift the coffee from my right hand to my left hand so that I can shake somebody's hand. That's like a
Ah,
move that you just have to master.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but I think relationships that I develop with people.
Hmm.
When I have somebody that truly has my back, even though they might not believe exactly what I believe,
Hmm.
I still have somebody that is going to be there for me when times are tough.
Hmm. What is your least favorite thing about church?
Oh my goodness. Um, the platform that it has to influence elections at this point. Oh my goodness.
Hmm. Okay. Um, if you could have dinner with anyone from the Bible, who would it be and why?
I mean, obvious answer, right, would be Jesus, right?
You'd be surprised. So many people don't say
I'm telling
Jesus.
you, you're
Yeah.
the second person to say
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's it. That's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think Jesus would probably be the first one. And then I feel like Samson would be a really
Mm.
interesting person to have dinner with.
Yeah.
He'd probably eat a lot more than me, but I would be up
Yeah.
for the challenge.
Yeah. Why would you pick Jesus? Just because it's Jesus, or?
I mean, that's the dude, right? Like
Yeah.
that's everything that there's so much that I want to learn from him and hear directly from him. And I mean, reading it's great, but being able to actually hear it, if I could go back in time 2,000 years and sit at his feet, that would be amazing.
I like it. Is there another religion you would practice, and why that religion?
Oh, that's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
So my degree is not in specifically Christian religion.
Okay.
It's actually world religion. So I
Okay.
have I understand how all these other religions function, and so it's kind of difficult.
Yeah.
Like Hinduism would probably be the first one that comes to mind.
Okay.
But then there's the whole caste system thing that they have
Sure.
going on,
Right.
and
Yeah.
we already have a class problem in
Right.
America,
Yeah.
and I don't want to.
Yeah. I got
Yeah.
you. Okay.
It'd be
Fair enough.
Hinduism.
Okay. Okay. Any advice you would give to someone struggling with their faith?
Hmm. I would say live in that struggle, live in that tension. But while you're doing that, read as much as you can.
Mm.
And also, if you come out on the other end and you find yourself no longer a part of the faith, that's okay.
Mm. Okay. I love it. Derek, it has been very much a pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah.
Can you tell people where to find you? All your social medias, all of that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can actually find me on Twitter and Instagram at Christ on the Left. It's exactly how it sounds, one word. And then if you go there, it has my links to literally everything that you could. It also has links to register to vote. It has links to find churches that are open and affirming. So you'll be able to kind of a one-stop shop to find all that stuff. But
Okay.
also my podcast is The Progressive Christian. And so if you it's available on any platform, you just go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast, it's available there.
Nice. Well, Bijou, did you have any more questions for our guest today?
No, because we'll be here for 40 more minutes. Although I will say, shameless plug, we would absolutely love to have you back because I just feel like there's so many other things. And this is my commentary as a close, and then I'm closing because the people say that I close 3 and 4 times the service, which is not true. So anyway, I used to always find it really problematic talking to people after church, and like they would just be on their heaviest witness, and everybody here is obviously a Christian, and I used to really hate the thought of having a light show, in a white room that's already well lit, like a TV studio light show. But now that I'm deconstructing and I'm in spaces where people are moving themselves around to make space for other people, I just want to do it more.
Yeah.
So.
Cool. Did you have any closing words for the people, Derek? Anything you want to tell them, like go vote, get vaccinated,
Wear your mask.
wear your mask?
D, all of the above. They just gave emergency clearance for the Pfizer vaccine for children that are aged 5 through 11. So if you have kids that age group, go and get them vaccinated. We got to get out of this this pandemic. It's so terrible. But wear your mask, register to vote, go vote. We got midterms coming up. And if you do happen to find yourself being a Christian and think that you want to vote for someone that has a D next to their name, do it. I dare you.
The D is for do it.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Derek. We want to definitely have you on again. Would love to see you again. Everybody, again, go check him out, the Progressive Christian Podcast. You can get it on any network, Spotify, Google Music, all the places you see us at. And if you want to find him on the web, it's at Christ on the Left. You can get that on Twitter and Instagram, and from there you can find links to everything. So check us out, check him out. Thank you again, and we'll see y'all next time. Peace.
Bye.
And for those of you who want to follow us on social media, you can find us on the Facebooks, the Instagram, YouTube, and Medium at We Hate Church Folk, and on Twitter at Hate Church Folk, because we could only have 13 characters.